Okay, so this is our Blender tutorial for Blender projects, part 1 and part 2. A few things to note is that as this video progresses, you'll notice the camera that is taking a picture effectively of this screen is going to follow the mouse around everywhere that I go. Now this should make it a little bit easier to track exactly what's happening within Blender as long as I move this mouse slowly, so that you can see, for instance, when I click on these small icons that are very hard to read in a recorded video, it'll make it a little bit easier to find where my mouse is and what I'm clicking on, because it'll always be at the center of the screen. The mouse will stay at the center of the screen. Also note that it may be helpful, it may be hard to see since the mouse will be moving around and therefore the camera. Down here, as I click with the mouse button, there's a picture of a mouse. It should show you what I'm clicking, and if I type a key such as the G key to grab, it'll show up with the text of what key I pressed down here in the bottom right hand corner. Now that of course will not always be in the display as we record, but when it is, it might be helpful to you. Okay, so let's get moving with a few important aspects of Blender that you will use. This is called the Properties toolbar. We'll use this to impart many different types of properties to our objects. And then down below it are the different forms of variables that can be set depending on which one of these properties is chosen. And you'll notice as I cycle through these, you have different property options for different objects within Blender. Okay. All right. So, for our very first trick, what we would like to do is get rid of this cube. To do that, you can right-click on the cube in order to select it. Then move down here to the Object menu. Slide on up to Delete. Notice on this menu it also tells you the shortcut key, which is X. X also deletes. If you click on that, it will then prompt you, yes, do you want to delete it? In fact, I would like to delete it. Notice this icon is your camera. This is the light source that's in our current scene. This grid doesn't actually appear when you render into a final image, it's simply there for reference. Alright, so the first thing we'd like to do is add a green cylinder and a red sphere. So I'll move over to the menu, tap on Create here on the side, and go to UV Sphere to create a sphere. Click on that. Come back into the graphic window, hit the G key to grab your sphere, and just pull it up here someplace within your three-dimensional space. Now go back over the Create menu, click on Cylinder. Here's my cylinder. Hit the G key to grab it, and move it over here into my space. Alright. Now is a good time to mention that there's a handy toolbar that you can turn on and off. If you go up to the right-hand corner here, there's a very small plus symbol. Now note, do not click on the slash marks up in the very corner, right up here, the very corner. Do not click on those, just the plus button down below it. If you click on that plus button, you'll have a screen full of useful information. And at the moment, things that are relevant are, I have a cylinder highlighted, that's why it's orange. Here is the exact physical location XYZ, three-dimensional space of the center of the cylinder. Here's how it's rotated based upon how it was originally created. And this is another method of rotation and scale. Okay, so that's rotation, location, and scale of the object. So you can scale the object in a couple different ways. All right. Now, if we run through other functions, this entire toolbar will change as we click on different objects and as we go through different types of functions within Blender. Okay. The one that I'd like to point you to that is very useful is this one right here, Lock Camera to View. It's under the View tab, Lock Camera to View. So what this does is allows you to go down into your View menu down here, click on View, pick Camera View, also numpad 0, and now I'm in my camera view. Normally, if you use your middle mouse button, hold it down and move around, it will pull you out of camera view. Instead, when we've locked it, when we do that, I can actually move the objects relative to the camera. Alright, so this makes it much easier to get this scene exactly the way you want it. So when you scroll in and out in camera view with the camera locked, this is actually moving the camera to give you this view. So when I scroll out, I'm now actually moving the camera further away from my objects. So when you're using camera view, having the lock camera to view is very, very valuable. Okay, now this toolbar, when we're not using it for something specific, can also be moved out of the way by highlighting it until you have the double left-right arrows, and then simply drag it all the way over to the right until it disappears and let go. Notice your plus sign returns, right? And when you have that double arrow over the plus sign, that is what you use to bring it back to life. Okay, now that I'm in camera view, I'm happy with my objects being in the center of my camera view. Right now I see no reason to leave the camera view, so we'll leave it as it is. Okay, so your instructions now say to make the cylinder green and the sphere red. Okay, to do this, we'll go over to our properties window for our cylinder. So here's our cylinder. Go over to the properties window. We'll scroll over to this one here that when you highlight it says material. We'll click on that, bring up the material menu, select new, which will give you a window like this. And the color is set by using the diffuse. Diffuse gives you the color. Okay, so I have a cylinder selected. My cylinder is supposed to be green. Click on diffuse, pick a green color that you like, and now you've made it green. Now slide on back over here to your world, right click on your sphere, scroll back over to material properties, hit new, diffuse, and make it red. Okay, congratulations, you've just succeeded on making a red cylinder and a green cylinder and a red sphere. Now we have to render these objects in the same view, and the same view means within your camera view. And post that as image 1. So here I'm going to go ahead, because I've selected my lock camera to view, I'll go ahead and zoom in on my objects, press down on my right mouse button, on my middle mouse button, and I'll adjust my angle a little bit, if that makes sense to you. And I will hold down my shift key and the middle mouse button at the same time, and that's going to allow me to drag this up and down, left and right, so then I can center it up. Okay, so scroll the mouse button to go in and out. Okay, hold the mouse button down and move your mouse, the middle mouse button down, move your mouse in order to rotate it. And shift key and the middle mouse button held down allows you to pan it up and down, left and right. So those three things combined should allow you to get your objects in exactly the position you would like them to be. Alright, now to render this, to render as an image, all I need to do is move up here to the simple version of the render window, click on the render menu. The very first option is render image. You can also do this by hitting the F12 key, and now you can see we have a basic image rendered. To save this as an image, we now go down to the image menu down here. We go up and say save image as, which is also the F3 key, save image as, and then we give our image a name. Okay, in this case we'll call this Blender part1.png. That file name has been entered. Make sure that the directory is where you want it to be. I'd like this to actually be under my documents directory, under captures. I'll scroll over to the right hand side here and click on save as image. Alright, now I'm done. Here's my Blender view. I'm still in my render. To get out of this render viewpoint, hit escape, the escape key, and now you're back into your editing area. Okay, so now we've completed part 1 after you just simply upload that image to the wiki, as you are well adept at doing. Alright, so now the next thing that we'd like to do in our instructions here is dig a little deeper into Blender, take the two objects from part 1 and move them out of the camera view so that you can build the next objects. Okay, so let's scroll back over here to Blender. Right click on my sphere, grab it, move it out of my camera's view. Okay, so I'm just moving it out of the way. Alright, So everything in this little rectangle gets rendered within the camera view. So I'm just moving it out of the view of the camera. This is kind of like in a movie theater, a production film theater, just simply moving something off of the set to the side. Okay, so now I'll right click on my cylinder, hit G for grab, and I'll move it over here with my cylinder. So they're now out of my viewport. Okay. Now what we'd like to do is create two colored cylinders and push one cylinder through the other at a perfect 90-degree angle. This is making a cross out of two cylinders. So there are a few things we'd like to do. First is create two cylinders. All right, now to do that, we have our Create menu. We go down to Cylinder, click on that, and notice here I now have a cylinder. It popped up in this top corner. I'll hit the G key to grab it and drag it down in my view area just because that makes it easier. And notice when this object is highlighted, if I scroll over here to the scene, cylinder 001 is currently highlighted. That means that the new cylinder I just created is called cylinder 001. Alright, I'd like to scale this. So to scale it, I'd like to be precise, so I'll make sure that I have this little axis icon clicked so that I have three object manipulation choices next to it. That's translate, that's rotate, that's scale. So I'll click on the scale one, scroll back up to my object. I'd like to simply make my cylinder longer, so I'll click on the blue icon here and I'm going to make it longer. I'm also going to scroll out my camera view a little bit, because I'd like the cylinder to be more clearly in view. And in fact, I will right click on my sphere, grab it, move it a little bit further out of the way. Same thing with my cylinder, right click, hit G to grab it, drag it over and click. All right, that's one cylinder. Now I'd like to make another cylinder, so I go up, click cylinder, go find that new cylinder, here it is, hit G to grab it, and bring it down within my camera view. Click it there. And notice here in the scene menu, this is now called cylinder 02. So cylinder 01 and cylinder 02 are my two new cylinders. Okay, so let's color these cylinders, just because that's always fun. Right click on the first cylinder, move over, hit property, new, diffuse, and pick a color you like. Go with that. All right. Right click on the other cylinder. Make sure that you're still click on property, click new, diffuse. Come up and pick a new color for that cylinder. So let's do a nice cyan cylinder. Okay, now they both have colors. I'd like to scale this cylinder similar to this one. So on this cylinder, you can see what I did is I put in a scale of 1, 1, and 3 just to make this easy. I'm going to change this number. So this is the scale, original dimension in the x-axis. Right. So if you look down here, x-axis is the red axis, y-axis is the green axis, z-axis is the blue axis. So this means that the x-axis, that's the radius of the cylinder in this direction, and the y-axis, the radius of the cylinder in that direction, have both been unmodified. They're both 1. X-axis scale is 1, that means its original size. Y-axis, it's 1. And then in the z-axis, it's roughly 3. So I'm actually going to change that to exactly 3. So it is 3 times the length of the original cylinder. I can now go over, right click on my next cylinder and make it exactly the same length by going over to the scale, and on the z-axis type 3. Okay. Now I have two cylinders of exactly the same size by setting the scale to the same numbers. Alright, the next trick is I would like both of these cylinders to be perpendicular to each other and running right through the middle of each other. The first thing I'd like to do is make that super easy for you, as opposed to you trying to do this by grabbing and hitting the R key and rotating one, and then you can imagine how difficult this can be if you try to rotate this around like that. and then you grab this one and you try to grab it and move it so they intersect perfectly. It's actually very difficult to do precisely. So what we're going to do is Control Z to put these back so they're both vertical. All right. What I'm going to do is move this cylinder to the center of our world, which is over here at this axis. This is where this grid is, the center of that grid. To do that, right-click on the cylinder, go up here to the top where it says location, and simply click on X and type 0, click on Y, type 0, click on Z and type 0, and enter. You can see what happened over here is that moved my cylinder to the center of the universe, okay, of our pretend universe here. Now, let's right-click on the blue or cyan cylinder, and let's go over here and rotate it 90 degrees. So I'd like to rotate it about one of the axes. Okay. Now, as far as which axes, it doesn't really matter for this purpose. So let's go over and do an x-axis rotation of 90 degrees. So I click on under rotation, click on x-axis, delete what is there, and type 90 degrees. There's 90 degrees. So what does that do? That rotated my cylinder 90 degrees. Now let's push this cylinder so it's at the same location at the center of this cylinder. Simply go up to location, highlight 0 for X, 0 for the Y location, 0 for the Z location. Now all three are 0. And what that did is slid the cyan cylinder inside of the yellow cylinder. All right, so that's kind of perfect. That's the sort of thing we want. Now what I'll do is middle mouse button, hold it down, and I'll drag it to the left to rotate my cylinder around so we can see it. You can see what it looks like. Okay, you can actually see it's a perfect intersection from all points of view, so it's quite precise. All right, now all we have to do is apply a modifier, our good old Boolean modifiers. So now I'll run over here to the right hand side, having right-clicked on the cyan cylinder. Right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the cyan cylinder into a new shaped object. It'll be the object where both the yellow and the cyan cylinders intersect in the middle. It'll be the object that gets created by only keeping the intersection and throwing away the rest of the cyan cylinder. So all this stuff outside of the yellow cylinder will go away. All right, to do that, select the object to modify, which is the cyan cylinder. Scroll over here to our properties, and there's a wrench icon right there in the center of the screen. Click on the wrench icon, click on Add Modifier. Over here under Generate, type of Boolean. Intersection, here we have to pick which type of Boolean we want intersection. Then we have to go to the right of that and click under the object. There's a little bar here we can click on. It'll show us all of the objects other than the one we started with. So cylinder 001 is the yellow cylinder, so I have to select that one. When I do this, don't click anything else yet. Just observe here that we have a yellow cylinder and we have a funny shaped object in the middle, which is actually what the cyan cylinder will be turned into once we apply this modifier. And that's what we're looking for. Okay, so let me go back over here and solidify this change by hitting apply. Till I hit apply, I can actually undo this by closing the Boolean modifier and retrieve my original object. So once I hit apply though, it's good and done. All right, click apply. Now don't click anything else, just slide your mouse back over here and hit the G key, just tap it, hit the key and let it go, and then move your mouse. And what you'll end up with is a really neat little pillow-shaped object. Okay. That object is the part of the cyan cylinder that used to be inside of the yellow cylinder. We kept that part and threw the rest of the cyan cylinder away. So we just made a brand new shape by taking the intersection of two others. Okay, so we'd like you to then render this in an image. Okay, let's go back up here to render image. Here's our beautiful image rendered. Down here to the image menu, save as image, and we will give this Blender Part 2 -1, because we'll have another image to create in just a moment. Now I move over here and click Save as Image. Alright, now I have that file created. I can hit Escape to get out of this viewpoint, and just like we did before, I'm going to scroll out a little bit, hit the G key, grab my pillow, push it out of my viewport, right click on my cylinder, G, click it out of my viewport, so they're now out of the way, they won't be rendered. And now it's time to create some more objects. Alright. So, to create the next objects, we are being asked to, let me scroll over here to our wiki page. Alright, so we are being asked now, make a colored sphere and a cube, place them together so the cube is poking out of the sphere, make the difference of the sphere and the cube, that is the difference, that's a Boolean modifier, rotate that object so you can see the hole that was made in the sphere, save this object, and render the resulting object. Okay, so let's go back over. Here's our viewport. We need a sphere, so create UV sphere. Go back into our viewport. There's my UV sphere way up here. Let me bring it down into view. There's my sphere. Okay, and now we need to take a cube, so we go back up to create cube, click on that, scroll on over here, there is our cube, hit the G key, grab it, and bring our cube down into our viewport. Okay, you can see these two are in the same space together. Alright, so there are a few different ways you can go about doing this. Notice that I have the scale, these square boxes means I have the scale modifier still on for whatever object I select. I'm going to scale my cube down a little bit. I'll show you a couple ways that you can do this and make it look good. If I hit the G key, I can move this around a little bit, and I can actually put my square inside my sphere. Okay. Let me colorize both of these in some way. So let me give my sphere a color. So now I scroll back over here, hit the modifiers. Notice this says sphere 001, so that's the name of the sphere. Click New Material, go down to Diffuse, and let's give this guy a color of some sort. What kind of color would we like for this one? I'd say let's make it a nice green. And in fact, you can change lots of properties about the color, translucency of your object. You can do a lot of different things with it here if you'd like to. So for right now, I'm giving it a green color, and I'm going to change the intensity to 0.6, which just darkens it up a little bit. Actually, I think I'll darken it up a bit more, make it 0.4. Oops. 0.4. Alright, so you see that just makes it a darker green. Alright. We can give our cube a color also if we'd like. So here's our new color for our cube. We'll give it, so you can see it clearly amongst this green, let's make it purple. Alright, nice bright purple. Okay. Alright. Color has been applied. Now, I'd like to take my sphere and cut the cube out of it. That means the cube will not be modified, but the sphere will become a new shape, and the sphere will become the parts of the sphere that do not intersect with the cube. This is what we call the Boolean difference. So, right click on the sphere, move over to the Properties menu and click on the wrench. Add modifier. Boolean modifier. Operation is now difference. We'd like to take the difference with the cube that we had just created, which is called cube. When I apply that, what I'll get at first looks exactly like what I had before. But what I have to do to see the difference is now move the sphere. So I have the sphere highlighted. I can hit my G key and simply slide my sphere out. And you can see that my sphere is now hollow and has these interesting round circles connected to each other. That's because I cut all the volume of the cube out of the sphere. Now let's render this and see a little bit more of what it looks like. Okay, so you can see a little bit what it looks like. If you'd like to see it a little bit more clearly, what I can do is roll over here and add a point light. So I add a lamp type, a point light. I'm going to grab a point light, click add. Here it is up in the corner. Grab it with the G key. I'm going to slide it and try to put it more or less right into the center of my sphere. One easy way to tell if I did that successfully is hit the view menu, go up to toggle quad view. Okay, so quad view will allow me to see where my object is. The object that I currently have highlighted, if I go over here to scenes and scroll down, is my point source. See, it says point. My point light is what's highlighted. So if I look here, this is the top view. So it's a top-down view. Looks like my light is right in the center of my sphere. Here's the front view. Looks like it's in the center of the sphere also. Here is my right view, so it looks like it's in the center of my sphere. So it looks like I'm good. All right, so I'll type Control-Alt-Q to get out of quad view. So all I wanted to do was use that to make sure that it was actually in the center of the sphere, because I want it inside the hollow space. Now if I go over to the side, I have point light. This is a light source. I have it highlighted. If I click on this little starry icon, it gives me the ability to control my light source. Energy is what makes a light bright, so energy of 1 is a starting point. I'm going to crank this up to something like 8, make it super bright, and let's see how that renders now. So I put a light in the center of my sphere just to show you what's really in there. Okay, so now I have an internally lit, like a jack-o'-lantern, cube cut out from the inside of a sphere. So that applied my difference. Okay, very good. So, one other way to do this would be to create a sphere. There's my sphere. Grab it and drag it down here. So this is another way to intersect the cube into the sphere. If I right-click on my cube and I hit the scale key and I simply make it much smaller, say like that, I can then grab it with the G key, drag it over here, and kind of try. All right, so what I'm going to do is use these sliders, but this is the scale slider because it has a square. So if I go down here and select the icon with the arrow, right down here, the one with the arrow on it, that allows me to go into translate, and you can see it says last thing I did was put in translate mode. This allows me to very precisely move it along the axes. Okay, so this is what I'd like to do at the moment. Okay, I'm going to rotate this a little bit. Oops, that's not the way I wanted to rotate it. Just rotate it like that. So now it is sticking inside the sphere. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like. You can see it's kind of stuck in the side of the sphere. Alright, now if I right click on the sphere again, roll over here to the wrench, click on the wrench, add modifier, type boolean, change intersect to difference, select the object of the cube. Okay, now I've applied that difference. Well, it actually did not do what we wanted it to do. Alright, sometimes it does get a little bit confused. So what I'm going to do is make sure that we get this right. So it got a little bit confused because we applied this square to multiple Boolean operations. So what I'll do is go over, instead of running into trouble, we'll simply create another cube, grab it, drag it down here, scale it down to a smaller size, grab it and put it more or less where we want it. So instead of fooling with the Boolean modifier being confused, I simply decided to very quickly just delete the cube because it's the thing that was involved in a cutout process already, a Boolean process already ready. And let's see if we can get this straight. Okay, so sometimes you just have to bail and do the simple part over again. So highlight the sphere, go over and apply a Boolean difference modifier and pick now my new cube. I deleted the first cube, so I have a new cube. Apply it to cube, hit the apply button, go over here, hit the G key, and grab my sphere and move it out of the way. Now notice in this case we now have a hollow area. Zoom in so you can see it and rotate around. You can see we now have a hollow area we cut out, right, but doesn't go all the way through. So that's just another way that you can affect the same kind of difference. So just two different ways to do a difference. That's all that is. Okay. There we go. Now of course we can choose to put a color on this one as well. And let's see, what colors have we not really used much here? There's a nice blue, and if I zoom in a little bit, shift middle mouse button, right, allows me to move it around, zoom it in a little bit, we can see what's going on. In fact, if I really want to, I can go back to a regular view, perspective ortho, and right click on this light source and move it around a little bit, do a render image, and see if we get some nice shadows. So I put that light source in a place that was a little bit closer to the camera so that I would get a nice reflection of bright light in the back of this hole and on the edge of the sphere. So you can see that there's a hole in the sphere. Okay, and then of course this one's internally lit. Alright, so render, image, scroll down to the image menu, image, save as image, and up here we'll then call this part 2-2. Have to go all the way over here to the other side and click twice to get to the save as image, and now we have another image file that we can simply upload. So that will be our third image of the overall Blender project. Okay, very good. Hit escape, get out of this viewpoint, and I'd like to go back to view, camera, and scroll out, because the last part says place all the saved objects in one scene with a colored background and use a plane for the colored background. So the first thing that I'd like to do is grab all my objects, right click, grab them, put them over here somewhere, right click, grab, put it in there, right click, G for grab, put it in there, right click, G for grab, and put that one over here. And well, let's give our cube some color. So let's go over here and material, new, color. What color would it like? Let's do an orange. There we go. Alright, I hit the A key to deselect everything. So A key, by the way, will allow you to select everything, and then hit it again, it will select nothing. Everything, nothing. Alright. Shift key, middle mouse button, shift my world around a little bit, zoom a little bit. Okay. So scrolling the middle mouse wheel allows you to zoom, shift and the middle mouse button down, and then move your mouse around allows you to pan it to move it up and down, left and right inside your camera view. Okay, so now what we need is a colored plane. So let's do this by changing our view to the quad view. All right, we need to go up to create a plane. There's my plane. All right, and I'd like to find a way to get my plane to be perpendicular to the camera. That means I want the camera to be looking at it as though you're taking a camera and shining it on a piece of paper to take a picture of the piece of paper. You want it to be exactly in front of the camera as much as possible. This can be very tricky to do. Right, because here's my camera, here's my plane. In this view, here's my camera and here's my plane. In this view, there's my camera, here's my plane. Okay, I need the plane to be behind the objects. If the camera's here, the objects are here, then I need the plane to be back over here. Right, so the first thing we'll do is move the plane. Okay, let's move it to make sure it's behind the objects. So camera's looking at these objects and there's the plane. This is my camera view, so I'll start to be able to see my plane falling into position the way that I want it as we go. Okay, so now let's go down here and hit rotate. Okay, rotate. And we'll want to do some simple rotations of our plane. How would we like to do that? The first thing I think I'd like to do is try to rotate the plane It can be very difficult to click these on a high resolution monitor the way that you want them. Okay, so I'd like the plane to be more or less straight up and down in this dimension, and then I'd like to rotate it around this way. Okay, and now I'd like to hit the S key to go into scale mode and just simply drag it to make it a little bit bigger. Alright. You can see we're starting to get roughly in the right shape. I'd like to click on my white circle here to rotate this around a little bit more to make it a bit more perfectly up and down the way that we would like it. Alright. So what do you think? Are we getting close here? Alright. So we'd like to rotate it up a bit like this. Notice if I click inside the circle, I can kind of push the rotation any way that I want. And now I have a plane that's more or less directly straight onto my camera view. Right. Now all I really care about is making this plane roughly take up this space of this camera view. So I can do that by going down here to our axes mode. That's translate, that's rotate, this is scale. I'll scale it. Go back up. The blue square allows me to make it bigger in this dimension, but I don't really need to make it bigger in that dimension. Right there's about the right size. But I do need to make it a little bit bigger in the other direction. So I'd like to scale it out like that. Right. Now what I'd like to do is move it around a little bit, so I'll just grab the G key and move it around a little bit. So now it's in the background. Okay, let's go give it some color. So let's roll over here. Color, we have the material button clicked. All right, click on color. Let's give our background a very light color of some sort. What's going to look nice? I'm not really digging that. Okay, let's go with this. Alright, a little bit of a purple. Now let's do a render image just to see what it is that we've ended up with. Okay, so we can see we have all of our objects here. Unfortunately, the light source seems to be somewhat in between the plane and our objects. We really want the light source in the front of the objects so that they would make shadows on the plane. Alright, to try to figure that out, you look over in this top view, there's my light source sitting over here. There's my light source. So I right click on my light source and hit G. I'd like to drag it out here a little bit more like that so it's near the camera. Okay, so I just drug it out here. So this is looking straight down on the whole scene. So now let's render image. Okay, well, we made a little bit of a difference, but I'm still not seeing the shadows that I want. Alright, so let's grab this and let's move it a little bit closer to where the camera is and render again. Okay, still not quite seeing what I want. Okay, so we have to try to figure out why it is that our light source is not casting shadows. So let's try to move this light source in a little different direction. And this just takes some playing around with. So let's render again. See if we're getting closer. I think we're getting closer. Alright, so let's move it some more if we have to. What I'd like to do is see if I can figure out exactly what rotation this is in. Okay, trying to find how far we have to move our light source in order to get the angle we want so that we actually have shadows. That is the trick at the moment. Alright, so let's go back into ortho. Oh, sorry, Control-Alt-Q for getting out of the quad view, and then I'm going into View Ortho. Okay, so this gives me an idea of what we're dealing with. What I'm going to do is stand behind the camera, and if we look at this, the problem seems to be that our light source is not quite perpendicular enough. Alright, now let's see what we get. Okay, well, we still have a very bright light source inside our sphere, but from here we should be getting a good picture. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go over to our point light here. We'll go in and turn down that really high energy. I gave it to something like 3. And we'll go to our lamp and turn it up to 2. Okay, and we'll go back over here and render. Okay, so the light source in here was so bright that it was actually washing out my shadows. Okay, now I'd like a little stronger shadow, so I'll hit escape again. I'll go back over here to my lamp, that is the one that's sitting outside the object, and I'll increase its light source intensity to 3. So increased energy to 3. Go back over, hit F12. You see now I'm starting to cast a little bit darker shadows. Now keep in mind these shadows are washed out some because I have a very bright light source inside. If I'd like to make them show up even clearer, I can go back up to the point light, go to its energy, and turn it down to 1. You'll see what a difference that makes when we render. Okay. Now we have much darker shadows, and you can barely tell that this is lit in the center. Okay, so now take that, you render the image, go down to Image, Save as Image. This is part 3. Save as image. Now we have all of our images, and we've completed parts 1 and 2. Okay, on to part 3 in another video.